2, 1, go.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to our Sunday morning Bible study. We're thankful to God on this last Sunday of February. We have the opportunity to study a portion of God's holy and divine word. We're thankful that He has blessed us with this opportunity. And we're going to take hold of it, seize of it, and put forth our time, energy, and dedication to the studying of these instructional Psalms. The last several weeks, we've been looking at Psalms related to or in reference to nature. So we'll be doing that. And we had been having a very good discussion the last few weeks on this chapter 19. This week, let's move to Psalms 33. Psalms 33. And I'm going to read these verses here. We're not going to make it through time-wise the entire chapter. So I'm going to focus on the first 12 verses. And this will bring us from questions 5, 6, and 7. 7, 8, and 9 we'll be looking at both this week and next week. But let's go to Psalms 33, the reign of God in His creation, Psalms 33. And let's look at the first 12 verses. And if we have time, we'll circle back to verses 13 through 15. But let's start with the first 12 verses of Psalm 33, and I'll read. Rejoice in the Lord, O you righteous, for your praise from the upright is beautiful. Praise the Lord with the harp. Make melody to Him with an instrument of 10 strings. Sing to Him a new song. Play skillfully with a shout of joy. For the word of the Lord is right, and all His work is done in truth. He loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. By the word of the Lord, the heavens were made. You're going to want to underline that. And all the host of them by the breath of His mouth. He gathers the waters of the sea together as a heap. He lays up the deep in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of Him. For He spoke and it was done. He commanded and it stood fast. The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He makes the plans of the peoples of no effect. The counsel of the Lord stands forever. The plans of His heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom He has chosen as His own inheritance. Okay, we're looking at this from a specific point of view, learning about God through nature. The first several verses people use in argumentative standpoint for singing during worship. We don't have time to dive into that, but that is a misapplication because we're studying this under the guise of the law. So if we're going to use this verse to support the structure of worship, we also have to give sacrifice, which we're not doing. So let's move past that. We don't have time to dive into that. Let's focus our mind in the discussion on the topic of study, which is the Psalm of nature, the reign of God in His creation. Let's look at 5. He loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. To me, this is interesting. I didn't have this highlighted, so I'm going to highlight this now. This is interesting because it's tying together two things, spiritual and physical, right? It's talking about righteousness and justice, which are spiritual moral constructs, but it's giving it in reference to physical creation. The earth is full of goodness, of the goodness of the Lord. So question 5, which is looking at verse 5, talks about how is the earth full of the goodness of the Lord? And I think that's a great question, right? Because like where did this correlation come from between a moral construct and the physical creation of earth, right? Most of the time when we think of physical and spiritual, and because of the New Testament vernacular that Paul was writing, we talk about them being at war with each other. Now, when we say that, we're not talking about the physical world specifically in the spiritual world. we're talking about the things that are confound or driven by the physical world, we're really talking about human beings, right? We're not really talking about nature when we say that from Romans. We're talking about our own physical nature, our own desires and things like that, right? So that's what we're normally speaking of. But we do speak of it in a general term. We know the physical is fleeting and passing away, right? So that we do know. But from a spiritual standpoint, we go into these things about justice, righteousness, and those sort of things. That makes sense. But this Psalms is tying these two worlds together, the physical and the spiritual. He, God, loves righteousness and justice. Okay, that makes sense. But how is the earth full of the goodness of the Lord? Right now, first, we can go and talk about the goodness of the creation, right? Let's just start there, because that should be the first place we look at, because that's the most obvious. And the reason why I say that is not to get your mind in the same place as mine with the Bible study, but if we go back to the creation, Genesis chapter 1, before we even get to this Psalm or the Bible study, if we just keep reading each day and each day and each day, it kept saying God saw that it was good, right? So like this concept of it being the goodness of the Lord is not far-fetched, because the Bible during creation was saying that this creation, every day, it was good, right? It was good, it was good, it was good. So as a basic concept, we have that, right? But let's go a little bit deeper than that, right? How is the earth filled with the goodness of the Lord? Now, we have been mentioning this. I'm going to reread it just for context. This whole chapter, however many weeks it takes us to get through this chapter, one of the verses cross-reference that you're going to want to keep in mind is the Romans chapter 1, 13 through 23. We looked at this multiple times, even in chapter 6, lesson number 6. But 20 is where we'll focus on today. First, Romans, the first chapter, verse 20. For since the creation of the world, so since Genesis chapter 1, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, creation, even his eternal power and Godhead or divine nature, so that they are without excuse, right? So this verse, verse 20, supports this Psalms 33, verse 5. But how? Right? In attributes, right? Characteristics. How could God's invisible attributes be clearly seen through creation? How is that possible? How could creation, the earth, be full of the goodness of the Lord? How is that possible? How can the creation understand these invisible attributes? How is that possible? And how can God's eternal power and divine nature be understood and seen through creation? Right? This is a good bridge between Psalms 33 and Romans chapter 1, verse 20. Right? Now, when we looked at this several weeks ago, we were talking about, we picked just one physical attribute, one creation. It was snowing hard that day. So we were like, look at the complexity of a snowflake, just as complex as fingerprints, right? And we talked about that and how what it took, right? What it took to get precipitation that's always in our firmament atmosphere to get heavy enough to formulate to make a snowflake to fall, right? Because snowflakes are in the air at sometimes and don't actually accumulate on the ground, to fall down. And when we can see it, let's say if it was the fall on our hand, the body temperature from our hand would speed up the process for the snowflake to dissolve and turn back into its form, which is water. And in that process, if we visualize it with our eyes or put it under a microscope, we would see the complexity of a snowflake, right? We looked at that. We talked about the design, the order, the complexity, right? Like the foundational aspect of that snowflake. And we were saying, if that snowflake is complex, designed, beautiful, artistic, creative, could we give those attributes to the creator that created that snowflake? In the literary world and in the art world, we do this all the time. When we're looking at pieces of art or literature of people, whether they're living or not, but we do it more so when they're past because we can't verify it anymore. We're trying to get a glimpse into his or her mindset, personality, and characteristics when they created that piece. And people will start arguing over, I think that these brushstrokes meant this, or I think that the way that she wrote this line meant that. She must have been going through this. Historians will go and say, look, a cross-reference to his life at that time period was this. And then they'll start categorizing all the works within a certain time period to match that frame of thought that they're looking for us to be a part of, right? We do this all the time, literary world and in the art world. So it's not far-fetched, right? It's not beyond human understanding, but it's more difficult and it could make you uncomfortable to do this with God, right? Think of a zebra, think of a tiger, think of a cheetah, right? These are animals, not only these, but these are animals who have outside portions of their fur and skin that has a visual, distinct representation that is much like as complex as our fingerprints. So if you think of that, I was looking at this past week because we were talking about this from doing some research. I can't remember the name, the scientific name. I think it was a Tasmanian dog, but it was native to Australia. It had went extinct in the early 1900s, so very recent. There's black and white videos of it, but there's only like a few, and it just died out. It looks like a smaller greyhound, very thin. And from the mid back to the tail, it had stripes that looked like a tiger, but the rest of it looked like a dog, right? And it was like something that somebody just created in Photoshop, but it's gone now, right? It's extinct now, unfortunately. But when you're looking at those, and I was thinking, wow, imagine just, I'm in awe of the animals that I can see. But imagine the complexity of the animals. I'm not even talking about people arguing about dinosaurs. I'm talking about actual animals that have been extinct since the 16, 17, 18, or 1900s. God created them, and look at the complexity. What does it say to his attributes and his external power to be able to create species, right? And the distinction between the species, right? I was looking at this past week in preparation. There was, I think, now I'm going to mess this up, but there was two pieces of fruit. I think it was a peach and a nectar, but they were arguing, the scientists were saying they were the same fruit. And basically the difference was the fur on the outside of one is a mutation over time to protect the fruit, and one doesn't have that, right? Like, and you look at taking the pieces of fruit, or when you do things with plants and you can graft a piece of a branch onto another branch or prune to save it, like these complexities, you look at salamanders or worms are similar to that way, that you can cut a worm or cut the arm of a salamander, right? And it will grow back. And scientists are studying those amphibians to try to reproduce those regenerating cells for human limbs. These are things that people are trying to figure out. Look at the complexity is, just think of those sort of things. Why? Why would these species be able to regenerate and others can't? Why even have that concept? Why was this species able to have a visual representation of stripes or spots and other species of the same category don't? These are just complexities. Look at stars, right? Look at the different planets, right? We're researching Mars right now, right? When you look out, the first thing I thought when I seen those images is it looked a lot like Utah or Arizona. And they were recording the sound and the visuals. And it took me a minute to realize I was looking at another planet, right? I'm not looking at Arizona or Utah. But look at the complexity of these things. Does it speak to the creator, right? Does it speak to anything related to the creator? One of those things that I see in just the examples that I gave, this by no means is comprehensive, right? We can go into the scientific community and find tons and tons. One is I see order, right? And I see purpose. And I think that that's two things where humans and God have a disconnect. Let's just keep our minds on relationship aspect, right? God is here, Ellis is here, we're in a relationship together. God has an advantage because he knows himself. This is 1 John. He remains faithful even when I'm faithless. And he also has an advantage because he knows me. Not even just saying because he created me, but he knows me and I don't even know myself, right? So therefore, he has an advantage in the relationship. Just look at it as a relationship. I, therefore, this is where we have to be honest. People who are younger in a relationship or people who are in different brackets in whatever demographic, you may feel this at different times, right? I sometimes, instead of gravitating to the fact that God knows himself in me better than I know him and know myself, I resent that at some time because it starts to feel what? Authoritative, right? That's why I said some relationships struggle when the person is older because they feel like you're almost being too parental, even though the person who's older is saying, oh, I'm just trying to give this level of experience that I have that you don't have, right? And that is a struggle for some couples, not every couple in that situation. So therefore, I sometimes resent that of God, right? Okay. When I look at the couple of attributes that I do know about him, let's just take order and this structure, right? This structure and order and purpose. I start to resent that because my life is not always orderly or following a purpose. So if one person in a relationship is orderly 100% and everything they're doing is following a purpose, and the other person is living haphazardly through life, that haphazardly part is me. I can see God orderly. Even if I don't look at it from my mind, I can look at his relationship with other people or nature and see the order of God. When I analyze myself and I can see disorderly conduct, instead of me saying I want to be more orderly like God, sometimes, if I'm honest, I start to resent that attribute. If you in a relationship, right, some of these things we talking about today, you can quantify because you'll see an attribute in someone else, whether it's a parent, a child, a spouse, a coworker, and the same thing that draws you to that person at a certain time period pushes you away. The same attribute, the same exact attribute. So when I need God to be orderly, I love that he's orderly. But when his order impedes on the order that I want to be a part of, now I don't like him being orderly. And see, that's the thing, some of the things I can see in nature because nature work off of order and a purpose, right? We're right now about to transition in this part of the world from winter to spring. It doesn't matter what we as human beings are doing. It don't even matter what the precipitation or the air is doing. Spring is coming orderly. It doesn't matter. So therefore, once spring arrives, nature is going to react like clockwork against that order that was established since Genesis. I can't really pick too many things in my life except for orderly sin that I can say, oh, I've been orderly doing this since this time period, right? God is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. So that another attribute, consistency, that I rely on certain times, that same consistency pushes me away at other times. If I look at nature, I see the consistency of that order and of that balance. I see the balance consistently. I see that of all these years that have gone by from Genesis to now, the world is still turning and standing, right? Have we damaged the world? Yes, right? We talked about some animals being extinct. We can talk about different ecosystems on Earth that have changed drastically. We can talk about the things that mankind created through chemicals and science and things that have hindered our own bodies or the ecosystem, but it hasn't destroyed the world, right? When I compare that balance of God is able to allow mankind to have free will and it not disrupt his divine will, right? Now I look at my life and say, do I have that? I allow other people's free will to disrupt my free will, but God doesn't allow that. So therefore, I can see times in my life where other people's destructive behavior has destroyed me, but God says that doesn't impact me that way. Not only does Ellis's destructive behavior not destroy me, because John is saying when Ellis is faithless, I remain faithful. Ellis's destructive behavior is not even going to destroy my creation. But there's things that I allow outside forces to do that impact me. So therefore, I can notice several things about how God has structured the physical world, and I can notice them a little easier when I do compare and contrast. Now, you don't have to only do it that way, right? You can just look at it as, oh, I can just see. You can just make a list, which this week I would encourage you to do, is to make a list of some attributes that you can see from nature. Right? What are some things that you can see from nature, right? If you're in a literary mind or artistic mind or scholastic frame of mind, this is something that people do and argue over the people we deem as greats for decades and decades and decades, right? Think of it from a spiritual standpoint, right? We looked at order. We looked at consistency. We looked at purpose, right? We looked at self-control, right? These are the things that I can see that God just, it looks like it's just natural, because I can go to any part of the world, any time period, and still look at creation and pick those couple of attributes I just listed. Any language, anyone can be able to see, yes, whether I acknowledge God exists or not, I do see order, I do see purpose, I do see consistency, I do see control in nature. I do. Therefore, that's an attribute. So some people attribute that to just random, right? We are going to attribute that to creator, right? Something is, if I go to a museum and I see a painting and this painting looked like a picture, I'm not sure how many people would say, man, I can't believe the colors just randomly formed and made this. Somebody would be, what are you talking about? Look, I just can't believe that the paint fell on the page and randomly created this painting. So say, are you slow? There's somebody painted this. Who? I'm going to say, did you see them paint that? No, but the name is right here. Well, no, I don't know if that person painted that. See, that's what people do with God. Did you see him create? No. Well, the Bible said, well, Bible, I don't know who wrote that, but this is random. But we don't attribute that to human creations. There's quotes and things that happen on earth that we attribute to what? Unknown. How come we don't say it was randomized? No, we say, well, we just don't know which person did it. But when you start talking about God, you have the detractors that will say this can't be real. But we will give unknown as an attribute to some human being created this. Why? Why isn't it just as absurd to say the painting formed haphazardly as it is to say the human eye? The complexity of the eye versus a camera. Cameras have come a long way, but it still can't capture the same as your eye. If you're confused by that, try to take a picture with your phone of your computer screen or the TV. And even before you hit to take the picture, tell me what you see versus your eyes looking at the TV and what's coming through the camera lens is not capturing the same. And this is of years of innovation. We still can't capture 100%. Try to take a picture of the moon with your phone, your eye looking at the moon, but you take a picture of the moon on your phone, and how good does the picture look? You're thinking, it looked kind of bright before. Why it look like that? Because it's very difficult to capture low light. This is of years of innovation, still not there yet. But how come I can't say these things haphazardly happen with human creation if people are going to say, oh, the eye just haphazardly happened off of evolution, right? We have to look at the complexities of these creations and give the creator some credit if you're looking at it from a spiritual standpoint, which is what we're doing this morning. So those are some things that if we just focus, our mind will kind of help us, right? So this goodness, all good things, let's go to James. All good things come from the Father of light. There's no shadow or variation of darkness. So when God is creating, verse 6, by the word of the Lord were made all the hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. Let there be light, and guess what? There was light, right? Let there be birds of the air. Let there be fish. Let there be animals. Let's make man in our own image. And these things existed, and they were good. And then when it was time for mankind, it was very good. So therefore, God, who is good, all good things come from the Father of light, right? God spoke something, verse 6 and 7, breathed into mankind, verse 6 and 7, and shared his goodness with his creation, right? If you are an intricate person and you do art, most of the time, even if your art is abstract, to the naked eye, it may look abstract, but to art historians that look at it, they'll start analyzing the complexity of even the brushstrokes and say this person was a dedicated person, a complex person, some person who paid attention to detail. Oh, how you can see that? How can you tell that person's attributes? Because look at the intricate detail once we zoom in and you think, wow, I didn't even see. Look at these little, this person started painting things in the background. That's detail. I could have just painted surface and didn't do that. I can start analyzing that. When we see it from this point of view, I feel like it's more visual and it's a more representation that's clear, that I can see a lot of these things because if God is good, he created things through him, his will, his words, breathing, making man in his own image. Therefore, I can see how God's goodness would pass along to his creation, right? And therefore, God is looking at these 6 days and everything is good to very good, and then he rested, right? This is the creation story. That process that jump-started until now has been existing and still showing his attributes, just like we can look at human achievements from thousands of years ago and still show true to that person or group of people's attributes. So the goodness, right? Full of the goodness of the Lord. You can spend a lifetime as a Christian scientist studying question 5 in chapter 33, verse 5. You could spend a lifetime looking for the goodness of the Lord in creation, right? This week, I'm just asking for 7 days. Take some time to look at creation and make a list of attributes that you can see the goodness of the Lord in comparison, right? I can see this, the ant community, right? Ants are a good thing to study, very communal. You can learn a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of, but there are some behavioralists and psychologists who look at the structure of ants and also look at societal structures, right? Bee colonies are also a good thing to study and look at. These are things that if you just spend a couple of minutes, 15, 30 minutes on YouTube, you will get a wealth of information just off of those two species and the distinction and comparison of how humans interact. Elephants are also another. If you're looking for a communal or a family dynamic from creation, elephants, ants, and bees are just 3 examples that you can look and research and say, wow, this is almost insane. How could these 3 species mimic or share in some of the same societal or family or communal aspects that human beings share, right? So these are just some examples that we can see this goodness. So therefore, community and family must be a goodness of God. If I can see that in ants, that must mean something, right? There must be some purpose for that. So when the Bible is making such a big deal about family, about community, about loving your neighbor as yourself, and I can see ants and bees and elephants and lions is another, monkeys are another. If I can see that, this must mean something. There must be some value there. 6, how were the heavens made? How should the earth's inhabitants respond to that fact, right? We've been talking about this whole time as an underline. Let's bring it to the forefront, which is you have to respond with respect. This is why I respect the scientific community trying to shed light on the damage that mankind has been doing. Another homework assignment this week on the flip side, not to single this ocean out, but go online. YouTube is better for this visually, and research the Indian Ocean right? Look at waste in the Indian Ocean and just do a search on YouTube. To me, when I look at it, it gives me the heebie-jeebies to see that much trash. Like when the waves are crashing on the shores and that much trash is in the wave, I almost can't see water. It just looks like the trash is moving. And I think, wow, because God made that and said it was good. Remember, he said that remember when he was talking to Job, where were you when I said the waters go no further? So like that would be like me going to the MoMA or to the Met, picking whichever is the most revered painting and just throwing a milkshake on it. Somebody would, I would honestly get arrested for that, truthfully. Well, then what's the difference? Somebody gonna say this is a human masterpiece. This has been in existence for 100 years, 1,000 years. I say, well, what does that mean to me? So I'll have no respect for that artwork. We do that for today, right? That's why me personally, I try not to litter, even since a kid. Now, some other people just say, what's the big deal? Throw this out the window, this, that, and the third. It's not about I'm concerned about a fine. I just view the creation in a different way, right? It's hard for me to divorce the creation from the creator. So I feel like if I'm in your home and I disrespect your home, I'm actually disrespecting you. So I feel that way with God, that I have to have more respect. So the last several weeks, every week, last week when I said I was researching about the crocodiles and these sort of things and the snowflake, the respect just grows because I think, wow, I'm not even thinking about these things. And you thought about these before mankind even got here. We were created on the 6th day. These things already was created and had a day plus a rotation. Therefore, I have to have some respect as the earth, biblical phrase, being God's footstool. I have to have more respect for where I am because to Job's conversation with God, I didn't create this. I'm just reusing what was already there, right? You can say the same thing with wealth comes from God, Deuteronomy. You can say the same things from creation comes from Genesis on. Dirt is there already, right? I'm just using the dirt to make a human creation. I have to give some respect, though, to the source of which those resources and materials came from, which is God. And that's something that I see in these last couple of chapters, 19 and 33 of Psalms, that me personally, my respect level for the creation and the creator has to increase, right? I can't only look at it from spiritual things because some of those spiritual attributes are clearly seen through the physical creation. And that's something that personally I need to work on more. So you can look at this week. I encourage you to do so. Look at it from the guise of some research. You can pick any type of creation, whether it's animal kingdom, plant kingdom, celestial kingdom, right? Pick something. My suggestion is video, YouTube. You can look anywhere. Just do a historical or earthly or a scientific research first, right? Just look at something, pick something, look at it, and then jot down some attributes that you can see, experience based off of that of God, right? What are some attributes? And also look at specifically, right, one attribute, right, one attribute that God talks to us about, right? The Godhead, the replication of a mirror of the Godhead should be the church, and that the mirroring of the church should be in marriage. Those three groups of each groups of those putting something else above themselves, right? Loving others more than yourself. One of those attributes is families, communal, right? Society behavior. Look at ants, look at bees, look at elephants, look at lion herds. Look at those things if you can this week as well. Just a quick little bit. National Geographic, Netflix has some good ones on YouTube as well. Anything. Just look at it from dolphins are another one. Certain whales operate this way as well. It just look at that. Just those two examples. A random one that you pick or a list of attributes that you pick or this communal attribute. And just look at the complexity in one of or multiple species of creation. even there's some plant communities that follow some of this communal aspect we were just mentioning. And wrestle with that this week to think, does that mean more than what I'm putting meaning to? Meaning, is God trying to say something with this attribute, right? And look at that this week, wrestle with it, personal study. Next week, we're going to start on 13 through 19. So we're going to be in 7, B, C, and D. We'll keep circling back probably to verses 5 and 6 as we kind of touch through this. But also next week, if you can finish the chapter on your own, look at the ways of our help and our shield. In what way is the Lord that as a resource? And 9, upon whom does the mercy of the Lord rest? So we'll try to get to question 9 by the end of class next week. But I encourage you this week, do a little bit of homework. Hopefully it will be a burden to you. Look at this chapter. God considers all man's work in comparison to God, the reign of God in his creation. That's the balance and contrast for Psalms 33. Look at Romans chapter 1, verse 20 as a cross reference, and look at James chapters 1 and 2 as well, just for personal study. Look at some ways that you can give more awe, honor, and respect to God through his creation. And also think of some ways that you can see God's invisible attributes through the creation of the world around you. All right. Thank you for everyone's attendance and preparation for the study. Prayerfully, you have a good personal study on these topics this week. If you're visiting with us online, you're our honored guest. If you have any desire to have further Bible study, these last several topics are very weighted, so it's hard to get through the amount of information that's potentially available in just a short time period. But if you would like to have a more in-depth study of this balance between physical and science and spirituality and God and creation, please contact us. Our contact information is in the description of the video and YouTube, and we would love to have a Bible study with you regarding this or your desire for salvation at any time. We are going to disconnect from this link right now, this session, and we're going to start in just a few moments, 10 minutes, our live stream for our worship service. So we invite you to join us momentarily. We pray that God will